Hi guys, I'm Miriam. I'm one of the bird team, but also I'm the education officer at the Conservancy, and I thought I would spend a little bit of time with you today talking about something quite fascinating that I talk about quite a lot with our visiting schools to the Conservancy, which I'm missing at the moment because this time of year we would be in full swing. This would be our busiest season actually for school visits. So because you can't come to us, we're coming to you. And we've run several workshops here at the Trust, which we've put together to kind of support elements of the national curriculum. And one of the sciencey based workshops that we run is an owl pellet investigation workshop. And we're filming up in Regis Wildflower Meadow, and you can see behind me I've got our little barn, which is actually where our barn owls fly out of during the 2 o'clock demonstration, and they quarter and fly at low level across the meadow, which once the long grasses have come through, it's such a natural setting to see the barn owl. And this barn behind me, because it's not in use and it's kind of old and just being unused, it's a perfect place actually for a barn owl to go, right, I might just sit here and roost here for a bit. So barn owls will often roost in old barns, hence the name, and you may find evidence of owls being there. Even if you don't see the owl, you may find evidence of owls being somewhere because they produce these pellets. Now pellets can range in size. We've got tiny little pellets. Well, this isn't actually that tiny. These are all the 3 pellets that I've got here are barn owl pellets, but it's just to give you an idea of how they can differ in size. So they can be quite small like this, or they can be whoppers like that. And both of these have been produced by a barn owl. I know that because they're very, very dark in colour, and they're actually, although this one's had a bit of damage, and I'll explain why in a minute, they're actually very smooth. So barn owl pellets are almost like lumps of coal. And what you tend to find with the owls, whether it's tawny owls, barn owls, little owls, long-eared owls, short-eared owls, they tend to have a roosting post or somewhere where they sit, which is within their territory, and they tend to produce these pellets in the same place every day, which is why you may come across a pile of pellets on the ground somewhere outside a barn, or if you're walking in a woods and you see like whitewash or evidence where the birds have been going to the toilet on the ivy on the ground or down the side of a tree. If you look around in that area, you might actually be underneath a favourite perching point of a tawny owl, and you may be lucky enough to find some pellets because they tend to produce them in the same spot. When they come out, when the bird so they regurgitate the pellet, it's actually covered in this saliva, so that it's not uncomfortable when they bring it up, but that makes the pellet quite moist, and when it hits the ground, as this one has, you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's flat, and that's where it's kind of dropped on the ground, where it's still been quite damp straight out of the owl. It's hit a harder surface and it's kind of misshapen, and that's broken it up a little bit here. So yes, they can vary in size, they can vary in colour. The barn owls, like I say, tend to be much darker, and the tawny owl pellet tends to be a paler grey colour, and they don't tend to be smooth or as smooth as the barn owl. They tend to be much rougher in appearance, almost like this if you like, with bones sticking out and very evident. So you can sometimes tell what owl has actually produced the pellet just from looking at the pellet itself, the colour and the shape and the texture of the pellet, which we talk about with the children when they come here. So what's inside a pellet? Well, it's like searching for treasure. I think it's the best treasure hunt going actually. I'm gonna break one of these pellets open in a minute and we'll have a look at what we see inside. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about what actually happens to produce this pellet. And you'll have to excuse me because I drew this in quite a short amount of time, but it's just, hopefully it demonstrates, it will help me to explain what actually happens. So your owl, every day or every evening, he goes out and he's hunting. If he's, let's talk about the barn owl for instance, he's going to be out there quartering across a meadow like we've got here at the Trust, in search, listening for things like your short-tailed field vole, common shrew, wood mouse, things like that. But what happens is your owl goes out, hunts during the evening or into the night. He eats his mouse, swallows it down. Let's say he's eaten a vole, and it goes down into the first part. His stomach has got two parts. Goes down into this little blue area here, down his esophagus, down his through his throat, down into his proventriculus, which is a bit of a mouthful, but that's the first part of the stomach. So that's where the vole would sit to start with, and the body starts to break everything down. So all the soft bits start to be broken down, and then everything then gets pushed down into the gizzard. So this is the second part of the tummy, where the things that the owl can digest then go off into the intestines and start to get digested, and of course what's left comes out at the bottom, and what he can't digest, which would be the fur, feathers and bones of the animal that he's eaten, then that comes back up about 9 to 12 hours later. It kind of compacts in the gizzard, and the gizzard helps to squash it all down, neat it all up in this incredible little parcel here, and then it comes all the way back up and he regurgitates it and spits it out. It looks like that could be quite painful to produce, but like I said, it's covered in this saliva when it comes up, and you know, this is a process that the owl goes through every single day, and it has to produce this and get rid of the stuff that couldn't go down through here before it then hunts again and puts any more food in its tummy. So it's a really important process. It's completely natural, and it's something that all owls do. In fact, all raptors produce a pellet. All birds of prey are birds which will eat live prey, catch live prey, eat it, and then they produce what they can't digest comes up in a pellet. And with something like a kestrel or a falcon or a buzzard, they're going to cough up a pellet which is going to be a very neat bundle like this, but it'll just be the fur or the feather of the animal that it caught, okay? Whereas an owl, you'll get the skeleton. If you're lucky enough to find, say, a little owl pellet, and they are diurnal, they will catch, they survive mostly off insects. So you tend to find all the shiny beetle shells in their pellets. They really are fascinating. So what we can learn from this is, obviously, the owl goes out over his evening, he's out for his nighttime hunting, and whatever he catches goes through this process, and then the following day he spits out his pellet before he goes hunting again. So what we can learn from the pellet is actually this one tiny thing can tell us exactly how much an owl is eating to sustain itself, to keep itself healthy in its environment, in one 24-hour period. What we can also tell is what kind of prey the owl is favouring. So now that we've talked about how these pellets are produced, we're going to dissect one. One of the reasons that I chose this area to dissect the pellet is just not just because you'd find a barn owl maybe roosting in somewhere like this barn and producing pellets on, you know, you might find them on the ground, but actually this tree that's just behind me here, one of our bird team members was walking up the other side of this hedge at the end of one of our days at work and came across a pile of pellets. They were also quite dark, but very, there were quite a lot of bones visible. And when he looked up from the pile of pellets on the ground and looked up into the tree behind me here, he saw two long-eared owls looking down at him, and that's the only reason that we knew that they were here, and that's the first time that long-eared owls had been seen at the Trust. They come in over the autumn and the winter and in the south of the country, and tend to hang around for short periods of time before they go back to their breeding grounds. So that was great, but we only knew because we found pellets. Anyway, I digress. Let's break a pellet open. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break this one here open, and I'm going to see if we can show you what's inside. So sometimes we might use water to soften the pellet first, but I wanted to do it like this because I don't know if you can see that, but I've just broken this pellet up and you can see all of the fibres of the hair. So this is the fur of probably short-tailed field vole that the owl has eaten. And then if we look really closely here, we've got the 2 front teeth of the vole, and if I'm very careful, what I can do is very gently, there's all sorts of bones now coming away, but I'm going to try to show you the skull without it falling apart, because you can, if you're very careful with them, you can discover the whole skull. Have we got it? We got it. So we've got a bottom mandible here. The jaws now come away in 2 pieces, so you've got 2 jaws, and then he has crumbled a bit, unfortunately. If I just take these out of here, in fact, use some tweezers and we can there we go. So those are obviously the where the eyes would be. Those are the eye sockets, and you've got the skull there, and then we've got bones like this. We did have bones like that. That's just flung across the meadow, gone back to the wild. Let's find a different bone. Here we go. Let's have a hip bone. Have a little look at a hip bone here. See how tiny it is. And then if I'm just a little bit rougher and break up this pellet. And here we've got another skull. So we've got a second skull already. This one's stayed a little bit more intact. Can you see? You've just got the jaw there. So I'm not going to play with him too much more. So we've got 2 skulls so far. So you start to see how we're able, from this process, to work out how much an owl is eating. And then all of these tiny little bones break up. And if you wanted to, and we're not going to, but if you wanted to, and you had lots of time, you could put the whole skeleton back together. So when we, oh, hang on, newsflash, I think we've got a third skull in here. So this is 1 pellet, remember, so I've got my mandible there, and I've got a really different, oh, that's just off one of those other skulls, look. Oh, this looks a bit bigger. This is where water does help a little bit, because it starts to help it to fall apart a little bit more. But I just think it's fascinating, because look at this. Skull number 3. So what do we know about our barn owl that produced this pellet? Well, we know that he went out one night, or early evening, because they're a crepuscular species. Look at the size difference as well. Anyway, I'll stop getting excited. they're a crepuscular species. I love that word. It basically just describes animals that are active in the twilight hours. So he went out between dusk and dawn, and he caught himself in this one hunting session. He caught himself 3 rodents. I think they are all field vole. If I really wanted to know, what I can do is I can take them apart. I can use my magnifying glass, and we can have a look at we can count teeth and look at the jaws and all the rest of it, and that can help us to identify exactly what kind of rodent the owl caught. But like I said, if we're looking at a barn owl, they've got a huge variety in their diet of different rodents and the common shrew, and birds and bats and things like that. Whereas if you were looking at a tawny owl, the majority would be wood mouse. That makes up a big percentage of their diet, and corvids as well, because they tend to like to catch birds that are roosting. And tawny owls do eat other things as well, but the barn owl is definitely one that has more of a varied diet. So yeah, that is owl pellet dissection in the meadow during lockdown. I obviously spend far too much time dissecting pellets because I find it really quite amazing still after a very long time. But hopefully you've enjoyed learning a little bit about owl pellets, and if you've got any questions at all, just let us know, and I'd be more than happy to answer anything about pellets. Thank you.